type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's Monday, November 20th here in Seoul, and I'm Shin-Yoon. You're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Chiji.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, now both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Taylor Swift postponed her Saturday night concert in Rio de Janeiro after a fan died due to extreme temperatures. On Friday, when the artist kicked off her first Eras tour show in the Brazilian city, a 23-year-old fan died. Though the cause of death hasn't been identified, many believe it had to do with Brazil seeing record-breaking temperatures throughout the week. The daytime high on the day of the incident was at 39.1 degrees Celsius. Food prices in South Korea have been on the rise this year. Take, for example, an apple. Apple prices have soared 20% compared to a year before, and that's why consumers are looking for ugly produce that may not look as good but taste exactly the same. Ugly apples, for instance, are 30% cheaper than pretty ones. With more people looking for ugly produce, more farms and online shops specializing in selling such products have increased over the past 10 months. Staying with local news, recently a news story of an elementary school student who wasn't even 10 years old has spurred a heated debate online. This elementary school student killed a senior in his 70s by throwing a rock out from the 10th floor of an apartment complex. The rock, which was about a size of a fist, hit the senior's head and then killed him. Now, people who came across this tragic yet flustering story asked who's to blame and held responsible. Is it the child? But here in Korea, if you're between the ages of 10 to 14 and commit a crime, you won't be sentenced. Our minimum age for criminal responsibility starts from 14. Then another question was, should the parents be to blame? So I would like to ask you guys the same question. Who should be to blame in this particular story?
Well, it's quite a difficult debate, isn't it? Because first, I think, yes, the child should be responsible for his or her wrongdoing. However, the punishment needs to be settled first. Now, but how can you punish such a young child for manslaughter? That's the question. Is compensation handed to the family of the victim? I'm sure that there will be some sort of compensation in some way. However, it was a freak accident. It shouldn't happen. Parents should be responsible as well because the child was at home. And I'm imagining that the child's parents were at least at home as well. And if they saw that their child had a rock, they probably would want them to, take it off them. But sadly, this is just one of those 1 in a million freak accidents that's happened. And I feel bad, obviously, for the family of the victim.
For sure. What about you, Chi? What did you think about this?
Well, from what we know so far, the families of the deceased didn't even receive a proper apology from the child or the parents of the child, and they were really confused and mortified at this news, and they were confused not knowing who to blame. So that's where all this debate arises from, and I think it's both the parents and the child's fault. I mean, elementary school students these days, they're bright and much more cognitively developed than we think. So by then, they should really know that throwing a fist-sized rock out of the apartment building is a very risky behavior that can even kill and hurt somebody. Now, I think it's also the parents who should have educated their child better, and it also is the fault of the education and the legal system in the country as well. It's common sense that they should be learning at school, and the law should be able to take punitive measures against these actions, even though they're young.
I think you brought up a really good point, because though this just may be like a news headline that you see on the news, it does have so many aspects to it. We can rethink about our legal system. Also, people are pointing fingers to whether we should once again try discussions on lowering the minimum criminal responsibility age here in Korea. So many different angles are tackled through our newsfeed story for today. But that was our newsfeed, and let's now switch gears to our main discussion topic of the day. Now, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is paying a visit to Britain to meet King Charles III. This is his second visit to the UK as president. He also visited in September last year when he attended the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Now, my AI voice secretary will highlight the significance behind his latest trip.
140 years. That's how long it has been since South Korea, the United Kingdom, established diplomatic ties. Back in November of 1883, Britain reached out its hand to the Korean peninsula, which at the time was called the Joseon Dynasty. The UK was the second Western nation to engage in diplomatic ties with Korea. To mark their long-lasting ties, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is on his way to meet with King Charles III. He and First Lady Kim Kyun-hee will become the first state guests for Britain since King Charles' coronation in May.
To commemorate 140 years since South Korea and the UK engaged in diplomatic ties, President Yoon Suk-yeol is to meet King Charles III. So, Walter, what do we know about his trip so far?
Yes, so President Yoon will be visiting from today up until the 23rd of November. Now, Yoon will actually be the first state guest since King Charles III's coronation, so that's very lucky for him. There will be a welcoming ceremony as well as a memorial service for the Korean War. And Yoon will also make a speech to the British Parliament and attend a summit with the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. So a lot to do while in Britain.
A lot to do during his packed trip. Now, Chi, would you like to elaborate?
Sure. Well, in addition to everything that Walter told us, on the 8th of this month, King Charles III made a visit to New Malden, which is a Korean neighborhood in London, in order to honor President and the First Lady for their before their state visit to the UK. Now, during his visit, the king stopped by the Methodist Church as well, where he was presented with the traditional Korean dish kimchi. And he also met with some young people who were enjoying Korean dessert called bingsu. It's shaved ice at a nearby cafe. And the king also visited a sticker photo studio, which is really popular among the millennials and Gen Z here, to see how it operates. So he basically had a very cultural tour of Korea in order to welcome them properly with some background knowledge of the country.
And what better way to do that than a Koreatown in the UK, as you can just see on the screen.
Exactly.
Now, it's also worth noting that, as you mentioned, Walter, President Yoon is the first foreign leader to visit the UK after the monarch's coronation back in May. And I think we can read into this as the South Korea and the UK having very close ties. So it's 140 years since they've engaged diplomatically. Let's read into that. Let's talk about how they developed ties.
Sure. So like you said, the friendship between South Korea and the UK has lasted for 140 years, making them important partners on issues ranging from regional security to even climate change. And they share strong trade relations and regional goals as trusted friends. Now, the UK has even shown great effort to improve Korea's status as well as to preserve the friendship through various diplomatic activities, this including their participation in the Korean War. And also, Korea has signed a free trade agreement with the UK very swiftly following the UK's departure from the EU. And the Korean wave, consisting of K-pop and K-content, has become very popular in the UK. And there are so many K-pop enthusiasts in the country, as well as a high popularity for the Netflix series Squid Game and the award-winning movie Parasite as well.
Right, and are there any stats to back this statement up?
Oh, yes, we do. So if you take a look on the screen, a survey was conducted by the Tourism Ministry to understand what foreigners, including those in the UK, associate with South Korea. So the survey revealed that K-pop is the most popular association, followed by Korean food and Hallyu stars. And also in January of last year, the government had conducted another survey which found that 80% of foreigners living in and out of South Korea viewed the country very positively. Now, the contemporary culture of South Korea, including K-pop and films, was cited as the main factor contributing to the country's positive image overall.
All right. And Walter, would you like to elaborate on this question as to how diplomatic ties have been developing from 140 years back to now?
Well, I guess it's, when we talk about modern day, I guess like Chihi mentioned, Hallyu has taken off globally, and England and Britain are one of the nations that have really caught on to this. And to be honest with you, the bond between two nations, what can be better than food and pop culture, I think. K-food is becoming more and more popular every year, and K-content such as Squid Games, that have been a good reason why Brits have caught on to so many K-foods. And as you can see, K-towns have been popping up everywhere. This is something that we only thought that would happen somewhere in America, but in England and Britain areas, there are K-towns almost everywhere. So, but I know recently a lot of small events as well to represent Korea have been going on. Now, Inalchi, who is a what we call a traditional pansori or Korean music band mixed with hip hop actually held a concert not too recently in England. And also they had a London Korean Film Festival as well. So there's a lot of back and forth relations between the two countries. Now, from restaurants across the globe, here in, Korean supermarkets have been growing. Gochujang has been a huge ingredient in many cooking and many ingredients around the world. And it wasn't too long ago that, 10 years ago, we wouldn't see any Korean foods here in other countries. It would just be in the Oriental section of a supermarket. But now, Korean food probably has its own aisle in supermarkets. It's just so popular.
Not only just Korean food, but as you mentioned, the ingredients used, like gochujang, which is chili paste, doenjang, like soybean paste. We're seeing so many different types of ingredients using like also produce from locally made Korean farmers, and that's quite interesting to see. And culture is definitely playing an integral part in bringing countries together. That's why, to find out how big K-culture and the K-wave is in the UK at the moment, we're going to include a global millennial who's living there. We're now going to talk to a fellow millennial living in London. It's Kenji Morimoto, a food writer based in London at the moment. Welcome, Kenji.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
All right, Kenji, as you've heard from our discussion so far, we can see that Korean dramas, K-pop, and now Korean food is booming in the UK at the moment. And I think you have a lot to say on this matter because you are a food writer there. So are you seeing a lot of Korean food at the moment? Do you think there was a specific turning point or time frame when there seemed to be a Korean culture boom in the UK?
Very good question. Yes, I'm a food writer, but I'm also a content creator, specifically with fermentation. So a lot of what I focus is on kimchi and gochujang, etc. But yes, over the past, I would say the last 5 to 6 years, the number of Korean restaurants, the number of Korean grocery stores, Korean skincare brand stores have popped up like no other. I moved to London about 6, 7 years ago. And when I moved there, it was quite hard to find one type of kimchi in a grocery store. Now, if you go to a grocery store, there's a few varieties. People are making them in small batches, artisanal. So it's not just, one brand only. There's many players now in the UK market who are doing it, but also adapting it to kind of local produce. So again, very much celebrating the authenticity, the origins of kimchi, but doing it in their own way. But yes, I would say Korean culture is definitely all over the place. And it's only growing kind of in numbers and also in terms of variety, which is really exciting.
Well, Kenji, then why do you think K-culture and food is so popular there, specifically among young people?
Very good question. I think it's honestly just very different and unique, right? I think, it's incredibly vibrant. There's so many interesting things coming out of Korea. As you were saying earlier, from movies to TV shows to, of course, music. And I think, it's just incredibly fresh for, I would say, the Western ear, the Western palate. And because it's so diverse in terms of what it can do and what it does, I think it's just incredibly exciting. So I think, it just appeals to millennials and Gen Z and Gen Z because it's so different. And there's so much to learn, there's so much to experience.
So being a Japanese American who is currently living in the UK, I think you could relate to how important food and culture experiences can bring people together. Now, in your opinion, what do you think needs to be done to better promote Korea's image in the UK or get more British youth on board with wanting to learn about more about Korea?
Sure. I mean, I think it's plain and simple. I think it's just, increased exposure leads to increased awareness. And I think that's what will drive the interest, right? Again, I think, from music to movies to TV show, but also social media, right? I think social media is such a massive form of, advertising, as marketing, as just awareness, as knowledge. And I think that will play a fundamental role in, increasing, again, exposure and awareness and therefore interest in Korea.
And Kenji, before I let you go, let me ask you one more question. How do you think the
Sure.
English youth at the moment are perceiving Koreans or Korea as a country as a whole?
Ooh, very good question. I would say pretty exciting. Honestly, the number of people who now tell me that they want to go to Korea, not just for the food, but just because, again, they've heard, they've seen so much about it. So I think it's really exciting in a way that when I was growing up, and again, this was in Chicago, people didn't really know much about Korea. So just within, a generation, things have changed quite a lot for younger people, just very intrigued to experience it and see it. So I would say, quite a lot.
Yeah, I think culture, food, K-pop, K-dramas are it's like the definite initial hook. But then once you get hooked into Korea, you find out all the history, the traditions, and what the country has to offer. And the next big step would be trying to plan out a trip here to Korea, as you mentioned.
Exactly.
Kenji, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you here today.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so now why don't you two in the studio speak on behalf of young Koreans then? How do Koreans perceive the UK? Starting with you, Walter.
I'll say that I'm the older of the younger, should I say, because I actually grew up in Australia and British culture isn't exactly, let's say, new to me because part of the Commonwealth, right? We get to learn a lot about British culture. So to me, as a millennial heading towards the end of the millennials, I think for me, and you'll see that the difference between me and Jihi is I think of Mr. Bean, Monty Python, the Beatles, Oasis, Queen. I'm talking about things back in the day, those sort of things. That's what I think of. Fish and chips. And the Queen, may she rest in peace. But then I moved to Korea and then I've spent a lot of my time here in Korea as well. So I'd say I've grown up here in Korea as well. And there's this fascination with the British accent here in Korea. There was a boom at one point, maybe 3 or 4 years back, and it was a sort of trend to learn the British style accent. Now, which is quite interesting because, especially in England, especially let's say London, let's narrow it down, there are so many accents just around the London area that there's not really one accent, and the ones that usually are taught are posh. But to be honest with you, it's kind of, think about it like Seoul in a way. There would be different accents within each region. That's not like here in Seoul, but yeah, I think Korea loves England, Britain, and the rest of, that area.
There's this type of image where we associate sophistication with England.
Yes.
Now, what about you, Tihi?
Well, when I think of the UK, I immediately picture Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, yes.
My all-time favorite book series, and the Beatles and Shakespeare, all these cultural icons. Although I have only been to Heathrow Airport in London during a layover, I have a very positive perception of the UK due to its rich cultural content, and many of them are very traditional as well. Plus, for someone who speaks English as a second language, it's really perceived as the origin of the language. And also, I still believe that the UK is a country of very well-mannered and gentle individuals as well. Gentleman image. And I'm sure for many millennials and Gen Z in the country, like you and Walter, I believe that we think of UK, the first country that pops up into our mind when we think of Europe as well.
For sure.
And like me, they would associate it with Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. I think that has to do with our generation being like a big Harry Potter fan. We grew up watching all the series. Also, whenever we think of like the stereotypical gentleman, I don't know why, but London comes up. And I've never even been to London. But there are those positive stereotypes. And I think this positive image has to do with us, South Korea, and the UK having engaged in diplomatic ties for 140 years. And to commemorate that and many more years to come, is there anything you guys would like to see in terms of South Korea and UK relations developing, especially with President Yoon's state visit there?
Well, if we take a look at the economic kind of perspective of the country, the UK's economy, much like those of other industrialized nations, they've seen a significant increase in the services sector, particularly the finance. And so there's a relatively small share of traditional manufacturing now. And the UK has gradually been shifting towards a higher value-added sector, such as the pharmaceuticals, the offshore winds, as well as offshore wind power and defense as well. So in order to capitalize on the UK's innovative capabilities in these sectors, Korea and the UK must see a new form of future collaboration, especially in these high value-added sectors, I believe. So we should really focus on enhancing the value of these industries and the companies of our country in collaboration with the UK and their sectors, industries as well, instead of just solely focusing on like selling large quantities of goods, like the traditional manufacturing and trade.
That's a very good idea, and I think President Yoon will touch upon that during his visit there. What about you, Walter? What would you like to say?
Well, given the situation the world is in at the moment, there's a lot of conflict between different nations, and I think that connecting with the UK will be a very good benefit for us here in Korea, especially with what's happening around us, because when you have good connections with the UK, you also can make indirect connections with the Commonwealth, so such as Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, etc. And these are going to be very useful allies. Hopefully nothing happens, but if something were to happen, that in case of like a war would break out. But on a more lighter note, maybe the trades agreements as well. Like I know that there's a lot of great British food out there that can come back and forth in between Korea. And of course, as we said, we've got some great food here to bring to England or Britain itself. So yes, I'd like to see obviously trade and the connection between allies in certain dangerous situations.
Right, and today we decided to dedicate this episode into talking about the 140 years of diplomatic ties between South Korea and the UK, all because President Yoon is making a state visit there. But I think for every state visit, whether President Yoon is in the United States or in different parts of Europe or in Asia, we always look at the diplomatic ties we have with other countries. And I think it's worth noting that for the generation, like the new generation, we might not be that interested in diplomacy or politics, but I do think it is important to understand that we have our eye on what's happening because it does affect us on a daily basis.
Right.
Like we might think that economics or politics are far-fetched from us, but as you mentioned, Chi, if we like find ways to invest in these key industrial sectors, it could affect our employment.
Right, create jobs.
And hopefully maybe we could see discussion foster as to seeing more Korean youth be able to go to the UK.
So true.
And vice versa, the UK coming here. And you talked about trade, for instance.
Yes.
We always talk about travels too, when not trade as in like country to country, but sometimes we can bring good snacks from the UK here to Korea as well.
Exactly. But like I said before as well, like the current state that the world is in, I've never seen it like this before. And so that's why I never took an interest in international relations. But now, though I'm, not old, but a little younger, I realize how important international relations are and how we must work together as, several different nations together just to stop wars from happening.
Because we're not just a citizen of Korea or Australia or wherever, we're a global citizen in this interconnected society. And hopefully we'll see some breakthroughs on that matter with President Yoon's state visit. But until then, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Chi Ji-hee.
Thank you.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.